Hi, my name is Damien Read and I'm 24i's SVP of Data Products. In early 2022, I began conducting a series of interviews with leading experts in video streaming, recommendations and personalization. My first guest was Dan Taylor-Watt, who spent 20 years at the BBC, starting in the digital radio team and then being at the vanguard of development of the BBC iPlayer from a product perspective. He ultimately was product director for iPlayer and BBC Sounds, and we were lucky enough to have him share his personalization and recommendation insights with us. So hi Dan, and welcome, and let's jump straight to the chase. What role has personalization and recommendation played in the growth of iPlayer?
So when it launched, iPlayer was not at all personalised, and I'd say over the years it's become just more and more important to the point that it was the primary focus. One of the things that we did was to talk less about personalisation and more about relevance in the broadest sense, and with that goal of aiming to make the content we promoted to people really on the money for them. More and more of our focus went onto that, and as the content catalogue grew, then that became much more achievable to offer a real richness of recommendation.
Does recommendations work?
The data says so. So I think another big transition has been introducing multivariate testing or A/B testing to really introduce some science into what's working and what's not. So the ability to make a change, to just show that change to a portion of the users and then measure the impact. And we found that the personalization in particular has had a really big impact on that. So for example, personalising the top rail on the iPlayer homepage resulted in a 36% increase in programmes watched from that rail. So being able to really translate it into very measurable numbers in terms of the impact that's having, and things like the continue watching, where you're deliberately tracking where people are partway through something, incredibly effective in driving more consumption.
What were the core KPIs that you worried about in terms of this MVP testing?
So specifically on the MVTs, then we would measure click-throughs, but also program starts and program completes, and with program completes being the really key metric that we were trying to shift. One of the sort of challenges / opportunities that iPlayer had was a very large number of people coming infrequently, and so the opportunity to get them to come more often was something that we were really focused on. So a lot of the top line metrics were around weekly reach, so getting people to not just come once a month or once a year. But yes, when it came to the MVTs, we were really focused on number of plays that people actually got to the end of.
Did you measure any of the navigational experience, such as time to find content or even bounce rates, people who came and didn't find any content? Were you worried about those? Or?
We did measure those, although I think that we found that you could there's a risk of drawing the wrong conclusions from some of those things. So I think the reasons that people spend time on a page can vary a lot depending on device and whether someone's just walked into the room. And so I think we definitely track those things, and I think interesting to look at the difference between platforms of what percentage of users are actually watching something versus those just arriving, and seeing that as you might expect, that's very high on TV, the number of people watching something, but much lower on mobile, where perhaps people are just planning to view something when they get home. So I think we tracked them, but didn't want to make it a success or fail because people were coming for different reasons.
Which area of the UX, you mentioned the hero banner there and how effective you could uplift that by personalising, but which areas did you find the most success in personalising? Like, did you personalise trending or most popular, or were they just left as pure trending and most popular?
Yeah, so one of the most effective areas actually was the end of playback, and so that moving from an opportunity to offer a generic recommendation to actually something specific in that moment. So that was one of the biggest uplifts we saw. Most popular is actually something that we left alone, and I think interestingly other on-demand services have subsequently introduced that as an element. So I think there's something about kind of knowing what other people are watching. One thing we did look at was how granular to be around people within a specific geography, and whether there might be differences in what people are watching within the different nations within the UK, for example. But certainly kind of that was an area of the UI where having a sort of unbiased view of what people were genuinely watching across the piece was what we aimed for.
When we were talking earlier, you mentioned the differences in content. Did you have different models and different data science and recommendations for different areas of content, like kids and sports, which are very different? Or did you have one generic model for everything?
We did have one model, but within that did have a number of rules that were specific to the different areas. So children's was a particular area of focus, and ensuring that we were recommending things that were age appropriate was a significant focus. But yes, it was the single model, but with kind of rules applied to specific areas.
We spend a lot of our time sorting out our clients' metadata and making it ready for recommendations. It's designed for an EPG or listings guide. It's not designed for recommendations. Was that a challenge that you had and solved at the BBC?
Definitely a challenge we had. Not a solved problem. I mean, it's impossible, I think, to underplay how important metadata is when it comes to recommendations and then actual usage. So I think we were heavily reliant on quite basic metadata in the early days, and then increasingly learn which new bits of metadata would really help us target things more effectively. So yes, not necessarily the sexiest topic, but I think incredibly important in terms of shifting the needle on the core metrics.
And did you find any particular fields within that or behavioural patterns were really important? Like, was it based on the description or genres, or which fields did you find in the model did you weight more highly to get the recommendations to really work?
So I think that we relied very heavily on genre and subgenre, which got us a certain way down the track, but I think did also show its limitations. A comedy programme that was broadcast on BBC One was Fleabag, but another one that might be recommended was Mrs Brown's Boys, which has quite a different audience. So yeah, I think that initially we were using pretty basic channel genre, but increasingly looking at the target age range, but also getting into the mood and the setting, and starting to be much more granular was bearing fruit.
You mentioned earlier also to me that you moved from an outsourced solution to developing recommendations in-house with the IREX solution. Why did you take that decision? What was the strategic motivation to move from outsourcing it to controlling it yourself? I mean,
two main reasons. I think the primary one being it's just so strategically important to being able to grow the service that it felt like something we had to have our hands on, and to not just be a black box. But I think also being able to iterate it quickly and in response to the specific catalogue and product that we had, rather than something generic and off the shelf. So I think that really understanding the content and the product itself, and then being able to evolve quickly and crucially that sort of cycle of understanding, making changes, being able to test them and really work out what's working and what's not, and not have to wait months or years for those changes.
There's been quite a lot of talk recently about algorithms controlling our lives and putting stuff in front of us and everyone existing in a bubble. Did you have any concerns about that for the BBC's audiences, and how did you address those if you did?
It wasn't a massive concern for me personally. I think there were certainly folk within the organisation where that was a worry, and there was a lot of public discourse around filter bubbles and the like. I felt like we were quite far down the other end of the spectrum, where we were really not doing a good job of surfacing relevant content rather than taking people right down a rabbit hole. I think I sort of found it helpful in terms of relevance to just think of it as a spectrum, whereby there's some things that will be relevant to 100% of people. So, for example, the Prime Minister announcing a lockdown is something that you want everyone to know about, regardless of their previous viewing habit. And so having a mechanism to ensure that you're still able to reach people with things that are relevant to everyone, but that you've got the fine-grained control to make sure that they're finding more of the incredibly niche things that's specific to them.
The other topic we talked about earlier and was related to my Now TV experience was there always seemed to be a battle between editorial teams and algorithms, which one is better. And you've been on that journey as well. Do you want to talk me through how the degree to which editorial teams and personalisation algorithms work together at the BBC?
I think really focusing together on relevance has found a path through. So a couple of examples. I think that we introduced if you like such and such a programme, you might like this. And initially we automated that 100% just using the metadata we had. And found that was quite problematic on some of the quality of some of the recommendations. So then got the editorial team to manually curate some recommendations, and then started to work with them to work out what missing bits of metadata had they identified, or what new rules could we then start to bake in to make that more scalable. And I think that helped us find a path through. Another example would be on the top rail of iPlayer, the new and trending rail. That used to be one size fits all, everyone got the same thing. And we made a change whereby we would just change the order of those programmes based on your personal viewing history, and saw a 36% increase in play completes off the back of that. So I think that a combination of focusing on the outcome of relevance rather than the means of getting there, that's kind of what saw us through.
Did you do, and do you still add tags and description manually, metadata manually to content, or do you shy away from that?
There is still some manual tagging involved, so I think the process of identifying what things might be useful additions, doing it manually in order to understand whether it's worth productionising at scale. I think that an organisation the size of the BBC to move from saying making something a mandatory piece of metadata is quite a big change, and so being able to establish in a more controlled way whether it's going to really get the benefit from that. But it's shifted quite a lot from 10 years ago, when we were lucky if we got sort of a single image and a short description to work with, whereas now there's quite a long list of things that will help a programme be found. And I think that there's a much greater understanding of whereas previously your programme title in the EPG and the Radio Times was the thing that sold it. Now people might not even read the title. You're scanning the screen for images, and whether your programme appears there at all is down to the quality of the metadata.
So looking ahead, I know you've left the BBC now, but if you were still there and understanding your vision for the future of personalisation and recommendations, what are the kind of features and functionality you see coming over the next few years for someone like the BBC?
I think relevance continues is the job that will never be done. I think there's an interesting convergence of live and on demand. So previously areas that were quite discrete and perhaps oversimplified to be the older audience are watching live TV and the younger audience are watching on demand. I think what we've seen over the last few years is an incredible impact from live moments amongst audiences of all ages. And so I think for services to develop such that they're covering the full spectrum of live and on demand for all audiences, and I think that bringing people together for those big moments is an important part of what the BBC and media more generally can do. So I think that's a big focus.
What about the area of extending personalization from within the user interface to marketing channels like email and push?
Yeah, I think it's a massive shift that's happening, I think, within the marketplace, whereby previously we could rely on people sort of rocking up to the front door of these big services. Then more and more the discovery is happening elsewhere, whether that's kind of across the web and social media or in TV platforms. Then a lot of the discovery is outside of the EPG or individual on-demand services, and I think that needs to be embraced and welcomed. That's kind of good for consumers, really. So I think that the not having to guess where you might find a program, but being able to search for it and find it wherever it may be is a good thing.
I read recently the BBC is starting to share data with Netflix and Spotify, and everyone is talking about this aggregated experience and consumers finding it hard to find the content they want when it's outside of the service they're looking at. Is that a direction of travel you think will actually happen, or is that just too hard to get these various competing bodies to share the data?
I think there's two aspects to that. I think in terms of sharing usage data and standardising that, I think that benefits everyone. So it's really positive, I think, to see some of the newer players in the market move towards being more transparent and consistent in how they measure and share that data. I think from a user experience point of view, I think that it's good for users to be able to search across services and easily find what they're looking for, and for those services to not be black boxes. That said, I don't anticipate there being a total consolidation of services such that everything's rolled up into a single service. I think that's often kind of mooted, but tends to fly in the face of how market economics work. So I think that we'll continue to see a number of big services coexisting and a longer tail of more niche services. But I think when it comes to search and discovery, there'll be more in the aggregation space to emerge.
Well, again, thank you very much for your time, very appreciated, and look forward to hearing more and hearing what your next steps are. Fantastic.
Thanks, Damien.
Thanks a lot.
Find out more at 24i.com.